This is the first video, and we're going to be introducing the concept of variables and the concept of assignment. So I want to start with a real-world problem. Let's say we have 3 buckets, each partially filled with water, and we want to combine them together into a 4th bucket to see how much water there is total. Now it's possible to describe the process of combining the contents of the 3 buckets without actually knowing how much water is in each bucket. For example, I can take each bucket in turn and dump the contents into the bucket that's initially empty. So first we dump the first bucket into the last bucket, then we dump the second bucket into the last bucket, and finally we dump the third bucket into the last bucket. Now this process is called an algorithm, and I didn't have to describe any numbers or specifics, I just had to describe the process by which we combine the contents of the buckets together. Now, to describe the process precisely, I have to be able to specify which bucket is which if I want to avoid ambiguity or problems like trying to pour from the same bucket more than once. If I'm telling another person what to do, for example, I can point to a bucket or tap on a bucket to indicate which one to pour next or which one to pour into. So for example, I can say empty this bucket, the white arrow, into that bucket, the red arrow, and then I can repeat that and say, okay, now empty this bucket into that bucket, empty this bucket into that bucket. Now, even with pointing, I still have to somehow keep track of the 3 buckets in my head in order to know which bucket to pour next. Now, to do that, I might internally use a concept like left, middle, and right. And so now we get to the idea of a variable. A variable is a name attached to a location in the computer's memory that holds information. It is very much like having a bucket with a name on it. We can refer to the value of the variable or the contents of the bucket by using the name. So for example, if we use the names left, middle, and right to refer to our 3 buckets and total as the name of the 4th bucket, then we can describe the process of combining the buckets as a 3-step process. So first, pour the contents of the left bucket into the total bucket. Second, pour the contents of the middle bucket into the total bucket. And finally, pour the contents of the right bucket into the total bucket. That's an example of a 3-step algorithm. And by using the names attached to each bucket, we can refer unambiguously to each element of the task. Now, when we are writing programs, the buckets represent locations in the memory of a computer. In a computer program, a variable is a name attached to a location in the computer's memory, and that location holds information. It is very much like a bucket with a name on it, and we can refer to the value of the variable by using the name of the variable. Now, variables hold data or information. For example, they might hold values that represent numbers. And so when we visualize the internal representation of variables in a computer, we can visualize it like this, with the names and the associated values as 2 columns in a table. Now, names in programming languages are strings of characters. Every programming language has rules for what is a valid name. In most programming languages, a name must start with an alphabetical character, lowercase a to z or uppercase a to z, or possibly a character like an underscore. The remaining letters of the name can generally be alphabetical characters or numbers or an underscore. So these are valid examples of names in most programming languages. Left, right 123, middle underscore bucket, total with a capital T, bucket in all caps, and underscore total. These, on the other hand, are some examples of invalid names. In this case, left space bucket contains a space, and a programming language will actually interpret that as 2 separate names. 42 right starts with numbers, which is generally not allowed. Middle minus bucket contains an invalid character because minus is generally used to represent subtraction. And something like # total also starts with an invalid character. So now let's move on to assignment. And how do we go about the process of creating a variable using assignment? So assignment is an operator for copying a piece of information into a memory location attached to a variable. Assignment is how we move information around computers, and assignment is how we can store information in a computer's active memory. So when we are describing programming language concepts like assignment without referring to a specific language, so in something called pseudocode, we will always use an arrow to represent assignment. The arrow shows the direction of information flow from the value on the right side into the variable defined on the left. So this assignment, left gets the value 10, copies the value 10 into the memory location associated with the name left. The next statement assigns the value 20 to the variable with the name middle, and the third assignment assigns the value 15 to the variable with the name right. As we make assignments using a programming language, the computer keeps track of the variables, their names, and their values. If we want to represent the current state of the computer's memory, we can use a table similar to a spreadsheet, and we call this a symbol table. We can visualize a symbol table as having a column for names and a column for values. After the three assignments on the left, the symbol table should look like this, with one entry for each variable that specifies its name and its current value. Now, to complete our algorithm for combining the values in the variables together, we can use the variable names left, middle, and right to refer to the values in the symbol table, and then specify that the variable total should be assigned the sum of the values in left, middle, and right. And given the values currently in the symbol table, total should be assigned the value 45. So to summarize, a variable is a name associated with a location in memory that can hold data or information. A name is a string of characters that follow a set of rules defined by a programming language. And finally, assignment is the operator that associates a name with a value by copying information into the memory location associated with the name. So now you can continue on to the next videos, which talk a little more about how we can use assignment and symbol tables to start to write programs.